All right. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Nice to see people here in the Shapiro Library that's housed in the Wallach Library Learning Commons at Southern New Hampshire University in Manchester, New Hampshire. Welcome to the people who are here in the room with me, as well as welcome to all our friends online who are watching this via YouTube. It's an exciting day because you're part of a new experiment at the library. We're actually trying to share information across modalities and have it be something exciting. And that's a good thing for us. A couple of ideas that we want to make sure are in your minds as we engage in open educational resources. It is Open Educational Week, so perhaps you're already participating in events across the country. But the whole notion of how do we increase access to learning for students across the board is at the heart of open educational research and open educational work. The notion of being able to access information, synthesize it, and do something positive with it in a low-cost fashion is what's opening the doors to education for a number of learners across the world. I'm pleased to tell you about some efforts at Southern New Hampshire that's also been happening we were learning about just this week. As you know, Southern New Hampshire University can now be classified as the single largest private nonprofit university in the country, with a student body of over 146,000 students, 3,000 right on this very campus, and 142,000 online, which is somewhat amazing. And you think to yourself, that's fantastic. At the heart of everything we do at Southern New Hampshire is transforming the students' lives through successful interaction in learning. Not content just with serving the northern New England arena, we also want to expand our reach globally. So not only do we provide programs and access to students across the country, we also are worldwide in our efforts, having just launched over the last year 4 teaching programs in refugee camps in Kenya, Rwanda, Malawi, and now Lebanon. Truly, the amount of effort that goes into transforming people's lives through education is well underway here at Southern New Hampshire. So I'm glad that you're here with us today, both to learn about the things Southern New Hampshire is doing, but even more importantly, to hear from some of the best leaders in the arena of open educational resources about what's happening in this space. So, as any good university librarian, my job is to get out of the way. With that, I want to make sure that we understand that many thanks go into having an event like this, whether it's from the SNHU audiovisual team, from the librarians at Shapiro, including Heather Blicker, one of our newest arrivals, to think up ideas about engaging with the OER, our OER squad from the Global Campus Center down in the Mill Yard, and the students and staff who are engaging online. It's a great thing. With us today, we have Dr. Preston Davis and Dr. Kim Grewe, both from Northern Virginia Community College. And I'll tell you, you'd think, that seems like maybe a small operation. It is not. We're pleased and proud to have these folks here today because they are the preeminent leaders in what's happening in open educational research and resources today. So, with that, as I promised before, I'll get out of the way. But please engage with our speakers. I think they have excellent ideas to share. And not to leave out the folks who are online, I would run and go to your pantry and get something to nibble on, because after our talk, here in the building, we'll have a small reception. So you could have crackers, we could have crackers, it'll all be a good thing. With that, into the great wide open, open educational resources at Southern New Hampshire University. Thank you.
Well, great. Thank you very much. We're extremely happy to be here and look forward to having what we hope will be a conversation. So as we're talking about things, we definitely want to welcome questions, comments, ideas to engage rather than to just sit here and listen to myself and maybe, Kim is a little more engaging in the way she speaks than me am, but we want this to be conversational and we welcome thoughts, ideas, suggestions, and other input.
Yes, and I would also like to echo that. I'm very happy to be here. It's an honor to be here because we are leaders in OER, but you all are leaders in online learning and have been for some time. And so I'm thrilled to be here and learn about your university as well as share a little bit about what I know about open education with you. All right. So how many are familiar with Tom Petty's song, Into the Great Wide Open? I have to tell you that because the next slide, I don't want you to think, as a former English professor, I don't have good grammar. So, without any further ado, if I knew how to use a, how do we get this
You
to
may
go
have to
forward?
use the arrow.
All right, there we go. So I wanted you to know under them skies so blue was on purpose. So, I
Right, we kept it at that threshold.
So, you know, a rebel without a clue is, you know, how the chorus goes. But what we're here to talk to you about today, it may seem a bit overwhelming. There is a lot going on in the world of open education, and there are a lot of open educational resources out there in all kinds of forms. And it can be very daunting, it can be overwhelming, but as we're going to talk with you today, there's a community of practice out there, a community of open. There's a lot of support out there as well as all those materials. And times are changing, and we're trying to curate, collect, organize, tag these things so that we can find them better and use them with more ease. So that's what we're here to talk about today. I think we would be remiss if we probably didn't introduce ourselves a little bit more better than that, though. So I'm going to turn it back on over to Preston, and we can tell you a little bit about our background.
Sure. So again, my name is Preston Davis. I am the Director of Instructional Services at Northern Virginia Community College. So I have responsibility for things related to instructional technology, faculty development, online testing, tutoring, library services, and things of that nature. And I started an OER project dating back to 2012. Where we wanted to build a program that would help students achieve a credential at our institution. And not really knowing exactly how to accomplish that, but we'll talk a little bit more about that and the team that we built to include so that we were able to come up with solutions to problems we didn't really know exist until we started getting into actually trying to build something. And of course, one of those folks that was instrumental in helping us to achieve that goal was Kim Grewe. So,
thank you. And my name is Kim Grewe, and I am a former English professor. You can maybe even tell that, I don't know. I began my career as a middle school teacher. I'm a lifelong educator and a lifelong advocate for public education and for making a difference in the world through education. And that's what led me to community college. I was doing OER before I knew what it was. You know, I taught English. I thought there's no reason students need to buy textbooks. So much of this stuff is out there. I'll just put this together for them. And I didn't even know at the time I was doing anything of note. And then as time went on, I decided I wanted to go ahead and pursue yet another degree in community college leadership. And I chose OER as my research topic. And I'm so glad I did because it has provided me so many opportunities. I've met so many great people. And I came into Northern Virginia Community College right when I was nearing the end of my program, nearing the time of dissertation writing. And so I was able to actually do a study at Nova with our students to talk to them about their learning in OER and what their thoughts are about OER and their learning. So very happy to be here and share some of this information with you here today. So what are open educational resources? Here's the latest definition.
and is everyone familiar with the term open education and resources and what it means? Okay. So won't repeat what the definition is, but there are so many approaches that one can take to adopting and utilizing openly licensed material as well as open access material to assist in teaching and learning at the college or university setting. And we're going to talk a little bit about some of the different approaches, but making sure that folks understand when we refer to OER what it is that we're talking about. And since everyone seems to have that understanding, we'll be able to move forward.
Yeah, thank you. And these are some of the types, but you know, and so I like this because if you're someone who's brand new to it and you're not sure, you know, how to get started, you can start small or you can start big. There are fully developed courses available out there already, but OER can be things as a tutorial. It can be a textbook, but not probably in the traditional sense that you think of a textbook. It can be open journals, as we say, all these things, streaming videos. OER doesn't have to be all or nothing. You know, it can be a little at a time. There's a continuum, and we'll talk a little bit about that. But these are some of the things that are considered OER.
So can I get a sense of how many folks here teach? Okay. And how many folks here are involved in instructional design? Okay, yeah. And how many folks here work in a library setting? Okay. Well, you know, all three of those elements are very important, which we'll get to in a moment. But understanding how you can approach a course and incorporate open educational resources, there are ways that you can take and adopt an existing course that someone has created and openly licensed, as Kim mentioned, and just use that and all of the resources that have already been curated. But most folks like to be able to take and tailor a course to meet the specific outcomes that they may have in their department or at their institution. And so taking some of the different components and figuring out what is out there, what you're able to leverage, and what might need to be created or revised to meet individual course needs, it gives you an opportunity to do something creative and to make sure that the end result is going to be exactly what your students need to be successful.
And I'm glad to see there's one instructional designer here. I guess I forgot to tell the rest of my story. Then I went to Nova and became an instructional designer. So I've been doing instructional design work for the last 4 years. And I think instructional designers are really important for, especially at a university like this where 142,000 of your students are online, for collaboration and how to best use. Because again, if you've explored some, you may have found something you really like, but the format is wonky and it doesn't quite fit or work. You know, people in technology can help with those sorts of things. Librarians could help you find another version too, but that's why OER is so important, to understand that it's a collaborative effort. It doesn't happen, you know, by yourself usually. Librarians are becoming more and more involved. Some colleges and universities are developing roles for librarians, and they have specifically tailored roles that are just OER librarians. But they've been the ones, like you all, right, who have been, you were sharing before sharing was cool, you know? You were like lending stuff out to people. And so, so it's important to bring in all different people who are with different roles who can help make this a successful venture. And I know you wanted to add, I think.
Well, and a lot of times too, you know, faculty sometimes they have great intentions, but they just don't know where to start. And understanding where to start, helping, you know, gather information, resources, materials to get that faculty member thinking about what they can do beyond adopting a textbook from a publisher and being sort of confined to how that information is presented in the textbook, but really, you know, building a course that they have a great deal of influence over, and knowing that the different roles that people are playing in this collaboration is really critical, because you're not going to be able to, one person, you know, fitting one of these roles is going to have a very difficult time actually being able to do all of the work that is required. But when you put together a team and you have people who are sharing their knowledge and their expertise, it really does become a relationship that you'll find will move past just the course that you may be working on, and it tends to become a movement within an organization or a division that influences many other courses developing and adopting these types of things.
And with that collaboration, we're going to kind of run through some of the things that each of these people can bring to the table when you're trying to develop OER courses or just find OER to use with your students. But with our Venn diagram here, it's the leadership role too is important. You need someone at the top who's going to be able to guide, support, direct, and Preston will talk a little bit more about that. just as a quick sort of run through, here's some of the things that librarians can do. I'm sure you know you all are superheroes. You can do a lot more than that. But when we're doing OER, this is the role of the librarian as a, a researcher, curator. It's bringing in the skill sets and the expertise of these different aspects of the college that really makes this a sort of a rich experience. I did OER by myself for a while because I was at a very small college, and I was just doing what I wanted or whatever. And but you reach a point after you've begun to work in it that you really do need some other assistance. I could use the expertise. When I ran into a textbook, I taught American Lit. American Lit 1's no problem OER, no problem at all. You can find textbooks already created by their colleges. All the stuff is in the public domain because it's all old. So it's really not a problem. Except in the live classroom, when you're piecing together, it wasn't one textbook, but you're piecing together elements, and then students come to class and they don't have the book like we used to do. Like I say, everybody look on page 98, and we're going to read this passage. And then I have some people on a computer who are pretending to have OER up, but they're looking at this. And I have some people who printed something out, but printed the whole web page. And the library's mad at me now because 200 pages just got print for this paragraph. And so when these sorts of things happen, you can see how having a team on which you can rely can really help you go to the next level with OER. And librarians, like I said, were sharing before sharing was cool. In the instructional designer's role then, too, advocacy is important. We're going to talk about, we're being frank, and we want to have conversation, and we're going to talk about the pros, the cons, the pluses, the minuses. There may be a pushback or resistance, and you really kind of need somebody who's going to advocate. At Nova, when I started to work there, not all the IDs were on board with the idea of OER, and not everybody was into it, but I just simply started by asking a faculty member, have you tried OER? Have you considered OER? And as soon as they expressed any interest whatsoever, that's when I would call Heather and say, hey, let's meet with our librarian. She is a treasure trove of information. And so that's how that can take off. So you can be an advocate as an ID. And like I mentioned before, the tech support that you can provide. And also you can help create that content with faculty who are the subject matter experts and content creators. Of course, they're going to deliver the material.
And assess the learning to understand if what it is that they're doing is meeting the overall learning objectives. Because we're all interested in student success. That has to be a focus of all of our roles and responsibilities in institutions. And when you approach anything that is instructional related, and you're doing so with the idea of student success and achievement in mind, that is going to inform the decisions you make and make things work out in much more favorable ways. And much like Kim, I actually started with OER before I knew what it was as teaching. I taught philosophy courses, and I was using a lot of public domain content because I had a textbook that I didn't really care that much for, and so I started pulling material and sending students to websites to find things, or directing them to look at what public domain resources were available through like the Internet Archive and things like that. And then as I learned about open resources and open licensing and things like that, it just, the light bulb went off in my head, and I said, this is great, and this is applicable in so many ways. It does take a little bit of work up front, and no one wants to be the only one carrying the load. And so if you're willing to take on a little bit of the work on the front end, it does give you a sense of accomplishment and a sense of ownership and control over the material at the end that makes it worthwhile.
And I think you wanted to talk a little bit about the role of leadership, administration and leadership some too.
Right, and so I think that it's really important. There are so many folks that are really hands-on with a lot of the work. And so the faculty, librarians, instructional designers are rolling up their sleeves and really putting in the efforts. But administration can really play a very key role in supporting and championing OER for what it can do, for providing information and feedback as to the results of these types of projects, providing support, whether it be financial support, whether it be providing resources and things like that to help with a project so that you can see it through to the end. There are various ways, but having leadership embrace this idea and not necessarily direct it, but provide encouragement and recognize the efforts that are being made, and maybe in a sense be able to use some of this as a way to review and provide possible opportunities for faculty and staff based on the results. So I think with all of the work that's being done, it's very important that at least the administration knows what's happening and can throw their support behind it. That's how you're going to make sure that it's not just a project or a one-off, but is a sustained project over time.
So we're going to tell you a little bit about what we've done at NOVA and just kind of run through our history. But as Preston's talking about, there are a lot of ways this thing can evolve. Some universities, like at University of Maryland University College, is that what they are? UMUC. They made a big, huge commitment to this, and they structured things so that top down, it was a mandate. It was not something that was a grassroots developed, then some administration got behind it. They got 100% behind it from the get-go and from the top down, and that's how they do their business. Whether or not that is good or not remains to be seen. I'm not here to pass judgment. I'm just saying sometimes I wish, we even wouldn't do it that way, because I would want an administrator to just say, do it already to whomever. Another way it can evolve is the way it evolved with us. I mean, we had one champion, Preston, before I got there, and he started the ball rolling. So I think I'm going to let you kind of talk
Sure.
about these, the history here. You let these kind of...
Right, so we had, there had to be a plan that had to be put in place. And we started off looking at our general studies courses that reached a very large number of students. These are students who were looking to complete a degree to transfer to a four-year institution. And so we wanted to look at what types of courses were going to be most impactful to those students and create at least a section which in my mind was going to translate to multiple sections and hopefully translate to all sections, in time. And in some cases, that is exactly what has happened. Yes, and which we're very proud of that, being the result, and people saying after testing the waters and teaching a course, realized the value in it and realized what impact it was having on their students, that they wanted to continue it and they wanted to expand it into other courses that they taught. They wanted to recruit their colleagues to get involved and sort of take the initial course and build it as a team and put it together so that 6 or 7 faculty members are now teaching the course, and all of the sections across the college use free and openly licensed material. So if you're not familiar, we're not nearly as large as you all, but we have over 70,000 students and over 25,000 students online. So we are a large institution, and so having the understanding of both a college environment made up of multiple campuses and an online program that has to use technology to effectively deliver instruction, it gave us an opportunity to do this in a unique way that leveraged technology, recruited and involved a lot of faculty who taught online, and then had those faculty take this content and then also offer it in their course sections that they taught on campus, so that it had a very large reach across the college. And so we wanted to have a program that led to a pathway, and eventually what we did was we developed a pathway in our general studies degree where a student could come in and complete the entire degree without having to purchase textbooks. Now, they have the opportunity, if they want to take different courses than are in our pathway, they can do so, but some of those courses do require textbooks, but that's the student's choice. But there is that opportunity in that pathway for them to complete a degree, and that can save students in our entire degree program over $3,000, which is a pretty substantial amount of money for a lot of our students who are returning students who are looking to further their education for a better job, and in an area that is very expensive to live. That can be a substantial amount of money for a lot of our students.
Yeah, and I think, can we just, we got that in 2014. I don't want to
So,
just
yeah, I'm not
glance
sure,
over that for you, but
no,
I wanted to
so-
get to the cost saving slide.
Right, so WCET is an organization that recognized our degree pathway with OER with their WCET Outstanding Work Award, which is a pretty prestigious recognition of the work that we were doing. And a lot of other institutions are now involved in similar types of programs, and it's not just community colleges. So as we're talking to you and you're at a major university and all, this is something that is applicable whether you teach first year students, whether you're teaching upper level courses, whether you're teaching in a graduate program. You can do this effectively.
Yes, and yeah, that's something I did want to say too, because we are community college, and of course our mission, I mean, we are open access. We're all about that. That's our thing, and so of course OER really goes hand in hand quite well with our mission. However, a lot of four-year colleges and universities are really heeding the call, and they're really getting on board. And I know that you all have a real social justice type mission too, to just sort of increase access and affordability and access to information and education. So, it is applicable to the 4 year. It's not just a community college thing. Because, one thing that I know is that the other thing that happens is as these OER courses happen, students start to talk to each other, and they say, hey, we don't have to buy any textbooks in that class, and so that's all anyone needs to hear, and then everybody's signing up for those classes. And so then instructors who are not embracing OER, so I mean, I don't want it to cause any sort of unprofessional tension or anything, but at the same time, it does motivate others then maybe to kind of take a look at what it is they're doing. Besides being free too, though, these OER really are customized to students. Instead of the textbook organizing the course or the textbook determining how you're going to approach a topic, or the textbook, you think about your students and how traditionally this is an area where they have a problem. So you're going to curate and collect that content that is like specifically going to address your students' needs. Maybe not all the students who take that course, but in this course, yes. And so it is an empowering thing for faculty, although it is also a bit of work. Do we need to, you talked about that. And that was,
So, well,
should I go back to my,
I
we've told
wouldn't-
most of it.
yeah, I wouldn't. That's fine.
Yeah, because we want to talk to you guys.
This was just a backdrop to kind of give a little bit of history about some of the things that we have done, and hopefully generate some conversations, some questions that you all might have. There are a lot of things that we have done, but there are still a lot of things that we want to accomplish and that we still want to do. And when we talk about open educational resources, it is a springboard to other types of things where you can start to involve students in some of the content that is being created and shared in courses, and so the pedagogy changes for folks who are teaching with open resources. And all of these things can have a very positive effect on the learning outcomes that students are able to achieve. So keeping all that in mind, are there specific questions or ideas? I don't know if I'm skipping too far ahead, because there are quite a few things
That's the slide I
that
was
we
trying
wanted
to get
do.
to. I think that's all.
But before we do ask questions, for us, when we reached a point this past year where our students have saved over $3 million, we knew that that was quite a substantial savings for students who otherwise may have struggled to try to decide whether or not they were going to be able to purchase course materials or have to forgo something else. We wanted to make sure that we do that. We continue to make inroads to doing the type of thing where we are recognizing that students have needs, and those needs go well beyond just us providing courses and an opportunity to earn a degree, but they have needs that we don't want to ignore. And so money savings is just one thing that we can do, but the significance of that, I know that there was a recent study that the University of Georgia did, I think it was a year or so ago, where a lot of students were determining a certain threshold for what could mean having to drop out or drop a course, and the amount of money that can impact students' decisions on whether to take an additional course or to drop a course can be a relatively small, less than $100 amount. And so we sometimes don't think about those things, but keeping that in mind when we see how much materials are going to cost students, and figuring out ways, if we can't just go fully open, but ways that we can incorporate other materials into a course to lower cost and to give students an opportunity to access a variety of materials, that is going to be beneficial to everybody.
And the research, just because, you know, you're librarians and I can talk to you about this, most of the research is pretty positive. You know, there is a relationship between students taking a course that uses OER and how many credits they sign up for next semester, how quickly they complete, whether or not they persist in general, what kind of grades they get in the course. Most all of the data really does show that courses that use OER, students do as well or better than courses that don't, and that students invariably, the ways they are successful and the ways they're measuring that right now with quantifiable data is through things like I said, like finishing quicker, taking more credits next semester. And there are a lot of studies out there that show that. There are no studies really that show that OER is in any way detrimental, and maybe we need to think more critically in our field and look at what some of the detriments could be, but other than it's more work at first, I can't think of any personally, but the research really is positive and backs up student success in courses that use OER in place of text. I just read an op-ed piece in Inside Higher Ed. We forget that $60 could make or break a student in a certain situation. $60 isn't going to make or break probably any of us in here, probably, I would guess, but it really could make or break. And then if a student decides to drop out because of that, that could really lead to, you know, a life of not finishing that degree, you know, at $60. So it's not just money savings, like you say, and I'm not sure it's correlational. I'm not saying that OER causes students, you know, of course, but still the research is very positive around this, and so. Is that about fair?
Yeah, so we still have a long ways to go in terms of having OER impact across our entire curriculum, but for 15% of our students, that equates to a large number that are able to enjoy the benefits of open educational resources and that cost savings and that ability to bring in course materials from different places and that engaging learning experience that comes from using material that students are getting from different places, which provides different perspectives. It gives them an opportunity to then continue to learn and investigate on their own and find material and resources that helps them understand concepts better, and that helps lead to better information literacy. So there's a lot of things that come from this that may not even be your primary objective, but some of these secondary and you know, tertiary outcomes are also very beneficial. So we keep that in mind.
So this is the part we were kind of rushing to, because we want to talk to you. We want to know what you want to know about. You know, we're here to talk to you today. You might have copyright issues because you're librarians. You might have all sorts of, so we're going to open the floor for now, and if there are no questions, we'll find a way to continue to talk.
We have our first one.
Yes.
I have just a quick question to kick us off. Did I get in front of you? Sorry. Quick question is just relating to the whole management and support of OER, the resources and the care and feeding of them, right? In many cases, OER can be free like a puppy or free like sunshine, and that if you want to turn it into something, you've got to work really hard to make it produce something, even though it's all around you. And can you just touch a little bit on some of the strategies for dealing with that cycle of refreshment, management, and discarding if need be?
Sure.
Thank you.
Do you want to start? Or?
Sure. So it's interesting, you know, the free like a puppy analogy is
because it's going to be a lot of work. And
is
it's always going to need to be fed and
yes,
washed.
it's very common.
But puppies grow up, and then they're nice companions.
Well,
But go ahead.
that's
I'm
true.
sorry.
They you know, they take a lot of care in the beginning, but then they become much more self-sustaining and independent. Yes, you still have to feed them, but you don't have to do as much to care for them once they're established, right? And so, thinking about it, and I don't want to imply that, you know, there are ways that sometimes things can get static in a course when you're using the same material for a number of years, and you're using other materials that are provided by publishers and things like that in terms of assessment tools and things like that. When you have to update content and you have to keep current, you're as a faculty member, you're in a sense doing that which you expect students to do, and you're keeping your level of expertise on the subject matter that you're teaching is staying current and focused, and that engagement translates to how well your students view you as an instructor. And I know this from experience because, you know, the idea of sending people to find the answer to a question by reading a chapter of a book may be difficult. Not that they should not be able to read a book and get the information, but some of them may not have that book. And so then they're not getting what they need from the instructor, and that can be very discouraging. And so it really does open up an opportunity for students to engage with faculty and faculty to engage with the subject matter. And so all of that really does help keep things moving in a positive direction, of course, instead of the course becoming kind of just in cruise control, you know. And I can say this as someone who taught, we get comfortable with things, and we kind of tend to replicate that which is comfortable. But that's not always the best for our students, and it's always not the best for us, because if we get bored and complacent at what we're doing, we're not going to continue to grow. And I think everyone who is in education wants to continue. We should all be lifelong learners, right? And getting involved in OER is definitely going to be a learning process, that's for sure.
Well, I would like to say there's some strategies, like there are some well-established places who create open textbooks, like Rice University and OpenStax. So I'd say some ways to battle that. As the movement grows, there are more projects out there that are well tagged and well marked and well labeled and able to find, and there are open textbooks and places that create. And we had a slide with a lot of these resources, and we didn't put it in, but we can provide those and talk more about those. But there are several out there, and that's what I would do. I would recommend going to well-established places to avoid those types of things. And then to Preston's point, you know, I would recommend staying engaged in your course, though. That can happen, but that is one of the arguments for sure about OER.
Chris?
So you mentioned teaching early American literature
Yes.
and how easy that was because so many of the texts that you wanted
Finding
to
the
present,
materials was easy.
right? Because they're, you know, free of copyright. Are there certain fields that you would think are just resistant to OER by their very nature? I was thinking, for example, if you were teaching 20th century
Right,
literature and you want to use primary sources,
Right.
nearly everything's protected by copyright.
Yeah.
So
Right.
what do you do there?
Right. Well, you're absolutely right, and I think some subject areas lend themselves better than others. But even that's improving because 4 years ago I was saying, don't do foreign language. No, you can't do foreign language. Nobody can do French. But now there are several really high quality, nice products out there for language learning that are open access. And
Right.
so I think it's a great question. I think like some IT fields sometimes struggle. And I do think contemporary literature type stuff struggles sometimes. But I do think there are ways around it because, as Preston referenced, it's not just about finding free resources. It's also about rethinking sort of what teaching and learning is and what it means. And to have students maybe create something, or find a way around, or find, so I don't know I don't know what the project would be right yet, but already I'm thinking if I had I think, help let the students do some of that problem solving and some of that creation. There are a lot of projects out there where that's exactly what students have done. Instead of, David Wiley calls those disposable assignments, of course, where you write your paper, you turn it in, the one teacher reads it, marks it, gives it back to you, and you throw it away. That's your disposable assignment. But the idea behind open pedagogy is to create assignments that are more authentic, more real world, maybe solve a problem in your community or whatever. And so that's another workaround, have the learners be part of the creation process too. But I think it's a very good question.
And it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to go in thinking that you have to go completely open from day one. You want to be respectful of, creative works and what people have done as this is their livelihood, right? And that's a little bit different than, say, research or material that is coming to us that has been publicly funded and should therefore be accessible to everyone without a paywall behind it. And then, the stuff in between really involves those of us that have content area expertise to be able to help build that and help those who are building that to organize it in a way that is accessible and useful and can be revised and kind of continue to perpetuate that type of interaction.
But different writers even, just back to English, and I'm sorry, I love books in English. Okay, thank you. We'll have to talk during the luncheon part here in a minute. But, like Margaret Atwood is totally into Wattpad and totally into like promoting writers who want to get out there and sharing work that way. And she even published part of one of her books. I wish I could think of the name of it. But anyway, in Wattpad, sort of serialized it and did a little bit at a time and released that free to people. And so actually, I think there are, it's just a movement that's growing in scope. And I think that there are going to be solutions to those problems. I do.
I have a question. You mentioned earlier about established places. And so it's a couple of questions here. One is about finding is OER at the stage now that there is sort of a rating scale of kind of reliability or permanence, because it seems to me like you could gather resources and put together your course in the summer, and by the fall every link isn't working and the content's moved to different sites or that kind of thing. So that kind of permanence, but then also that established piece that we tend to generate as librarians and our evaluation and information literacy and all those kinds of things. So is there more on that, or how do you go about addressing those two pieces?
I think that there's a distinction, and this is where material that is openly licensed has the advantage because that material can be taken and can be kept, and you can use it, you can revise it. You don't have to worry about it going away because it exists in so many different places, and once it's openly licensed, it's always open, right? And so it's not just going to one place where this material resides. If it's open access and you can use it, there's a lot of value in that. but there is a little bit of risk in that if it's not a reliable place, it could go away. There are places that certainly are quite reliable. And so there are a lot of folks, whether they're individuals or institutions, that have YouTube channels that put a lot of material out there, and you can count on that material being there and it not disappearing. Whereas if it's from a place that is an individual person's website and it's, you know, a blog, there's a little more risk to that type of thing. But curating content and figuring out how you can put it in a place so that it's always accessible by you and with your folks is a way to avoid some of the, you know, potential issues of relying on something and then having it disappear. That is not something that is happening very often anymore. I would say 5 years ago, it was certainly a risk. I don't want to say that it is not a risk, but it's a pretty low risk.
Well, and I do want to say too, free isn't open, and I have to say that. You know, as soon as you write something, it's copyright protected. It's yours. You don't have to copyright it. It's copyrighted. If you license it, openly license it, what that does is say, here's how I would like to share it. You know, and so you can decide whether you want it to be shared in the form it's in and never should be changed, or whether you think it's okay for it to be shared in the form it's in and used however people want to for non-commercial purposes. Or you could say, you know, so you put those different permissions on when you openly license, and then if you find an openly licensed material, the chances are, as Preston's saying, that's going to be something that was purposely licensed that way and out there for that reason. Sometimes we find things online that are free, but they haven't been licensed. Somebody put it out there for their students to use or something, and then we find them. You know, I found a whole textbook that was a PDF, but it wasn't openly licensed, so that was not. So we use the databases to work around that one. But these things do come up, and that is true. And I would like to go back to my slide with the, you know, rebel without a clue, because even when you have all this information and then you go look, even if I'm just trying to put photos that are openly licensed in my slide presentation and then how to cite them correctly, you know, sometimes it takes a little longer than you want. So it's a good and fair question, but I think that if you are look for things that are actually openly licensed, have that licensing on it, I think that's helpful.
Sure, and if you're creating something and you want to openly license and share it, it doesn't mean that you're not still the control, the creator of it, and you know, you're attributed that work, so it can be very valuable in a sense for recognition and for the attention to what it is that you've contributed, but it just gives folks an opportunity to use that material in a variety of ways that's going to best benefit them and their students.
Can you give some examples of successful ways to incentivize faculty to adopt open access materials? You mentioned money, and that's an obvious one, but can you go into any more detail on what works?
Yeah, so sometimes stipends do give folks that justification, and they're usually relatively small, but it's more an acknowledgement that we recognize that you're taking on some additional work, and we want to make sure that we are providing some support for you to do that. Sometimes it is in release time, so you may get 1 or 2 courses taken off of your load, and instead that time is going to be spent on creating or revising content for a particular course or for a series of courses or what have you. Sometimes it's about professional development and saying, we're going to send you to this conference and we're going to give you an opportunity to do something that is going to be beneficial to you, and the expectation then is you're going to use this material that you're going to be learning about through these professional development opportunities to reduce costs to your students and use this material in the courses that you teach. So those are some of the most common ways that you can incentivize faculty. But another thing that I think is very important is that a lot of institutions, primarily research universities, they have expectations of faculty to do research and to publish and things like that. And I think it's very important for institutions to recognize when faculty have contributed open material, and if they have published and openly licensed content, that should be treated in the same way as something that may be published in a journal or something else, that it is legitimate and it is accessible, and it is reflects well on the faculty member as well as the institution. And by recognizing that and using that for tenure and promotion as you would other types of things, I think that's a very effective way to incentivize, but it also legitimizes OER as well.
And I do think you can also try to motivate people too. If you can find, like, you can always find some faculty who are all psyched about doing new things. So you find those people and get them started and let the excitement grow, and then try to spread the word that way. I went to a talk one time and someone talked about, this is really helpful to me, said like there's always going to be like 20 or 30% there that you're never going to reach. No matter what you do, they're never coming on board. And then you got like that 10% that no matter what you say, they're doing it. They're on board. It's those other 70% we want to try to reach. And so I like to try to like just build enthusiasm. Just, you know, I know that seems Pollyanna-ish, but I do feel like if some faculty who are positive and have positive results with their students, because even the curmudgeons among us all care about students, I think. And I think if we remind faculty that the whole thing that's driving this is just, you know, trying to help students make college an accessible thing and an affordable thing, I think that can sometimes go a long way. And then tying them into their professional development plans, as you were saying, but just more specifically, because we've redone our faculty evaluation in the VCCS recently, and we, you know, so you can tie that, it's in one of our domains, you can tie this sort of kind of work into those domains and tie that into evaluations too. But, you know, the money thing's an issue because eventually it's going to need to sustain itself if you want it to sort of be a thing that grows and has a life of its own, so to speak. So, you know, that, and plus what we can offer for money is usually not very commensurate to the amount of work needed.
Stipends can help get something started, but that's not a long-term solution to incentivize. I think recognizing what faculty are doing, and that's a much better way to do it.
This kind of dovetails on that too. So we live in this culture of you get what you pay for. And some examples come to mind, like, yeah, you can have Amazon, but you can have Amazon Prime, and then you can have music, and then you can have 2-day delivery. Well, yeah, you can go on Plenty of Fish, or you can go to, you know, eHarmony, and that's more money, but you're going to get better matches. So, you know, I mean, just this is our society. Like, if you pay a little bit more, it has more value. So, to me, my question is, how do you combat our societal belief that, well, if it's free, I mean, are you shortchanging us now? Like, what kind of resources are you actually giving? You know, I just kind of feel like there's that mentality.
It's one of the quote, and pardon me for saying it, myths of OER that they say. We actually have like a list of frequently sort of like wondering questions, and I feel like that's a wonderful question. There is a mindset that, you know, you get what you pay for, and if it's free, it must not be good.
You know, but I think
I don't know
sometimes
how to answer
I think
that,
sometimes there's a
actually.
threshold.
I paraphrased your question, Preston.
So I think sometimes there's a threshold, right? And I think you gave some really good examples of that mentality, and there's truth to that. And so it is something that we have to be conscious about and figure out ways around it. But I think that at some point you reach that threshold. And so I think I'll use an example is like cable television, right? So people are paying, and you end up paying more and more and more for all of these packages, and you realize that, you know, the more you pay for, the more you get, but it doesn't mean it's the more you're using, right? So think of all these channels as a chapter in a textbook, right? Well, how many of those channels in your cable package are you regularly using or using at all? It usually is a very small amount. So what are people doing now? They're saying, you know what, I'm going to cut out this $150 cable bill, and I'm going to go to this, you know, $25 a month package that is streamed online that has, you know, doesn't have 200 channels. It's got 30. But 20 of those 30 are the 20 channels I watched out of the 200. So it's a much better deal. And so there are other things that people are seeing where money does not necessarily equate to value. And so with the quality thing, you can make the case for how content that is regularly updated can be much better quality than content that is being kind of recycled over and over again. But it's also the value proposition. And I think more and more times people are wanting to make sure that they're getting the best value, and it's hard to beat the value of getting something that works well and not paying for it than paying for something that does the same thing.
And I would like to add, too, there's research out there. You know, when we research around OER, it's the COO framework, so we look at cost, use, outcomes, and perceptions. And a lot of those perception study did ask faculty, you know, and there are a lot of the perception studies show that faculty think they're pretty high quality. They end up finding out that they're high quality when they're actually asked to examine. So there is research that indicates these qualities, or these OER do have quality. Another thing I want to say is, if someone went to the trouble to put it out there and openly license it, you know, they probably went to a lot of trouble. And kind of to your point, if they're constantly updating it, and, you know, there are educators like myself who I'm so happy to share things, and I want people to see my work, you know. I'm not expecting to make money off of it, and it's as good as I can do. I think it's pretty good quality. So, I mean, there's that too. But there's research you could lead people to, you know, and I would be happy to share some articles with you. I still think we need some articles, though, that maybe show the negative sides of OER, because I don't see a lot of that. You getting ready to give me one, Bill?
Well, perhaps, but what I wanted to touch on was, you've brought up the word legitimacy a couple of times, and even thinking about where the OER content is created, whether it's through faculty effort, whether it's incentivized, and professional development's a good pathway for those who are at faculty at Southern New Hampshire. We have access to the student grant program that's supported through University College. That's another vector for that type of support. But more to the point, let's take which may be the last question with our time, legitimacy. So there's lots of content out there, and it's a heavily fake news world right now. And one of the struggles that we have, I think, is educating about literacy and what is truth. And with open educational content, what are some of the strategies or the touch points that you look for to ensure that something is actually valid, right? As an example, let's pretend we are working with an organization that might not have a ready, accessible pool of faculty to create content for their programs. Instead, we might be harvesting content, because it's open, from a variety of other sources. Isn't legitimacy actually a concern? Thank you.
It is a concern, and I think that this is a great example of the critical importance of librarians in this kind of relationship, because being able to curate appropriate content and material and help faculty determine what is legitimate and what is reliable versus what is not, that really is going to translate into the effectiveness of the material in the learning process. And that's why, you know, I want to go back to the idea of, you know, although faculty are the ones who are teaching the course and are really critical in kind of this grassroots growth of open educational resources, you know, without the help of folks who understand how to effectively deliver the content, you know, like the instructional designers, but also how to find and use appropriate material in an effective way, which is what the librarians oftentimes do. Without that approach that involves all of those different components together, you do run the risk of something falling through the cracks. And so if there's anything else that I want to leave with, is that this is something that is not the responsibility of one person or one role at an institution, but it takes people who wear multiple hats to pitch in and contribute their area of expertise, so that what the outcome is going to be, you know, really what it is that you want to see happen. and I really appreciate that question because it's something that we wrestle with a lot. And over the past 2 years, it's gotten to be much more of a problem than it was before. And so, and there's, at the same time, there's more material that's being created and shared, which is great. But that means that we have to be even more diligent about looking through this content and looking through this material and making sure that it is appropriate and it is designed to be objective and to provide a learning experience rather than, some sort of propaganda or something else that may end up doing the opposite. I don't have I wish I had some wise thing to say that here, but I don't, unfortunately.
Well, and I would just like to add too, you said information literacy, and I just would like to say that again. Information literacy, because as an English teacher, I used to try to teach it to my students. We would evaluate websites, for example, and so I would recommend that faculty do the same thing. Who wrote it? When was it written? If you can't find any information on it, that should be a red flag. But then again, that's when I would go to Heather and say, hey, Heather, what is this? So I mean, it is an example of how it's important to bring in different roles into this process. But information literacy in this world, with the glut of information out there, we all sort of have to kind of keep refining that skill. But the question's a very good one, as you say. Not an easy answer.
Do authors get pushed out of the equation? In other words, the people who used to make money by writing things, creating content, how do they fit into this whole perspective?
You mean textbook authors?
Or anybody, because educational resources aren't just textbooks. There are lots of other things.
They are.
And if you're not being paid by your institution, you're not doing something else while you're creating those. But the people who actually do that kind of creation, I'm thinking of videographers or people who are making those kinds of educational resources.
Yeah.
It seems like you have to be paid by somebody else in order to make them. Like you can't make a living as a. Do you see what I'm
saying?
Right, exactly.
Right. Like I'm an OER writer.
Yeah, unless you're independently wealthy or whatever.
Yeah.
But just wondered if that side of the picture ever gets discussed.
Well, I know that people sort of fear that a little bit too, but I don't. I think about things like the way music is different now. You used to buy CDs all the time or tapes or whatever we bought, and now you probably subscribe to a music service of some sort. And I know some artists, like Mr. Tom Petty, God rest his soul, did not put any of his work in Spotify, but a lot of them did. And so I just am wondering if it's sort of the way the business model is. We're sort of changing the way we consume material, and so I don't know how to answer that. I think no, but I don't know. I can't support my answer with good reasons.
Well, and I think that certainly some folks are impacted, but it's usually the folks that received very little monetary support for what they did, and so folks who contributed to chapter and textbooks and things like that. Well, once that occurs and then the textbook is owned by the publisher, then they can revise and redo a new edition of that constantly without any additional, payment. And sometimes there are royalties that come with certain types of publishing that folks can enjoy. But I had a faculty member who wrote a history textbook, and he basically told me that writing and openly licensing his own history textbook meant so much more to him than the $220 royalty check he got every year from the publisher for the previous textbook that he had written that was being sold to students. And that's what he was getting every year for this material that he, and so.
I think the business models.
Well, and I also think that it's important to distinguish between material that is created for the purposes of instruction and teaching versus creative works that are being used to facilitate learning. They're different, and they should be looked at differently, and I have a great deal of respect for folks who are writing fiction and creating entertainment and creating music And I think that they should maintain ownership of their creative works, and there's ways that we can use those effectively in instruction. But so much of the material that we use in teaching are materials that are created for that purpose, and they take small pieces of creative works so that, in a sense, they use fair use much better than any of us do, right, as faculty, because we don't really understand what can we do and what is too risky for us to do. So I don't know that I'm answering your question, and I really apologize, but I think that there's a way for this stuff to coexist, and there's a way to leverage openly licensed content, freely accessible material that people are creating and that you pay for, so that you're delivering things in an efficient and effective way for students at a cost that they can afford, so that it's not a burden to their overall achievement. Because we don't want to set up, whether intentionally or unintentionally, obstacles to student success. We want to do what we can to eliminate those obstacles and streamline the process for students to earn their credential, earn their degree, and help contribute back to society as a whole.
I just am thinking too, again, a little bit about the business model of things. Like you have companies like Lumen Learning now, right? And they make their money off of the curation of these openly licensed materials. Now it's much more affordable for students, and perhaps it's a better product than a textbook. But that, or like you think about Netflix and like Bandersnatch, like now you can make your own ending of a movie if you want to, Spotify, you're going to stream your music, you're going to pay per month, you're not going to buy CDs. I just feel like OER is part of that too, a little bit, because I think students are expecting to consume their materials in this capitalistic culture in a certain kind of way. And I think in this capitalistic culture, we'll find other ways to make money. But I don't think anybody was making a lot of money writing textbooks. Maybe selling to their students at the university or whatever. But as Preston said, if we can, and I know legitimacy was a word, but give more legitimacy to that kind of work so that professionals in education can be given whatever sorts of benefits, or whatever that they earn, for tenure, et cetera. I think, nobody can take that, OER doesn't change that. But I think it's a great question, of course. No concrete answers.
And if you come up with an answer, please share it with us.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's an excellent stopping point for our online portion today. How about a round of applause for our speakers?
Thank you.
I also want to just underscore that one of the things that was very prevalent throughout the entire presentation was the notion of it's a group effort, if you will. It's not just one academic unit, it's not just one faculty, it's actually across the entire landscape. And that also gives me the opportunity to remind you all that today's programming was brought to you by a collaborative effort from the University College Academic Affairs Department, the Global Campus Academic Resources Department, and the Shapiro Library, which works out of the Academic Quality, Accreditation, and Success Department here at Southern New Hampshire University. Sounds like a mouthful. You can imagine how to get the collaboration happened was even more of a mouthful. So, but that's the effort. That's the work that we're in, is to try and make this stuff happen across the landscape for the betterment of the experience and success of our students. So with that, thank you to everyone in the room. Thank you to everyone online. Please watch this space. We'll have updates throughout, and you can imagine that there's more happening in Shapiro Library every day, so it's worth watching what's happening here at SNHU. Thank you all, and have a wonderful afternoon.
Thank you.